Family thinks they adopted a rare dog. 2 years later, they realize it's not a dog at all. Adding a puppy should be one of the happiest moments for a growing family. When one family adopted its newest member, a specific puppy breed, they could hardly contain their excitement to start raising him. But their excitement would quickly turn into fear as they started to notice something strange was going on with the newest member of their family. Suan was like a lot of mothers around the world. She was hardworking and her life was non-stop action. She felt like she had her hands full with family time between raising her 2 children and spending time with her husband. Suan and her family were living in China, specifically in a southwest province in Kunming City. Their lives were relatively normal, but that was all about to change. She was about to add another member to their family, a pet, and what she thought would be a happy addition would soon take a drastic turn, making headlines, putting their family in the spotlight, and changing their lives. Like many other families with young children, life can get a little hectic. Suan was feeling the pressure and she needed to plan a little getaway. She booked her family a long-awaited vacation in Asia and was counting down the days until the trip came. When the big vacation was coming up, Suan packed her bags, got her children ready, and figured out all the logistics of her trip. As she would soon learn, no matter how much preparation goes into a trip, there are always unexpected situations that arise. But no one could have predicted the outcome of a seemingly innocent encounter with a litter of adorable animals. After months of anticipation, Suan and her family were finally on vacation and excited about what was to come. During a walk one day with her kids, Suan stumbled upon a group of puppies put up for adoption. For a long time, Suan's children had been begging their parents to let a dog join the family. Despite her previous refusals, Suan was falling in love with one of the little puppies. After years of considering it, Suan decided it was finally time to give in and get a pet. Soon she'd realize she'd taken on much more than she would ask for. The man who sold Suan and her family their newest family member told them about the adorable puppy they were adopting. The seller warned that the dog was a Tibetan Mastiff, a large breed that can grow to reach 180 pounds and stand over 2 feet tall. That's one big fur ball. Suan and her family decided to name their adopted little puppy Little Black. They named him partially due to his black fur and partially in irony based on how big he would become. The name might sound a little funny in English, but in Chinese it seemed like a cute name for their pet. Little did they know that Little Black would become a pretty big deal and could possibly end up landing the family in legal trouble. The family continued to fall in love with Little Black throughout the rest of the vacation, on the trip back and as they returned to their home. When they got home, the family had some choices to make about how to raise their adopted puppy. The climate in Kunming City allowed for some pets to live outside, so some families kept their dogs in the backyard. Regardless, Suan and her family decided to keep Little Black indoors so he could live right next to the rest of the family. As Little Black adjusted to his life, the entire family was pleased to see that he had a healthy appetite and settled in pretty quickly. As time passed, though, they started to notice some strange things about the newest addition to their family. Like the dog seller warned, Little Black didn't stay too little too long. In fact, there was hardly a moment when Little Black would stop eating. Suan was new to having a dog, so her pet's diet was a little strange. Every day, Little Black ate an entire box of mixed fruits and 2 entire buckets of noodles. For most dogs, eating fruits and noodles would leave them pretty sick, but Little Black was seemingly unfazed by his fare. Regardless, things were beginning to get out of hand with the amount of food he was consuming. By the time Little Black was 1 year old, Suan had already spent a fortune on his huge appetite, but this would soon be the least of her problems. As Little Black continued to grow, so did his never-ending appetite. The family that had originally been encouraged by how much their pet was eating was now growing concerned. Suan and her family had heard of huge dogs and had expected their dog to be large, but they were not expecting anything quite like this. By the time he turned 2 years old, Little Black already weighed a whopping 250 pounds and was 3 feet tall, much larger than the seller had predicted. His size grew to be jaw-dropping, but pretty soon his size wouldn't be his family's only worry, as they started to realize even more peculiar things about their adopted pet. Sure, many dogs, especially Tibetan Mastiffs, can grow to be a little bigger than expected, but size was nothing compared to some of the other shocking things that Suan started to see around her home. One day, she saw something particularly disturbing in her kitchen that set off some alarms in her mind. When entering the kitchen one afternoon, she saw Little Black standing on his hind legs. To be fair, many dogs sometimes stand on their hind legs, but only for brief periods, and not like this. For Little Black, he was standing like a human, definitely not normal. At that moment, Suan knew deep down that something was seriously strange about her new dog. The standing incident in the kitchen had proved not to be a one-time thing. Repeatedly, Suan would enter a room to see Little Black standing upright. Suan had started to get a little scared and started looking at her dog and noticed a few other peculiarities. Little Black had gigantic teeth to match his gigantic size. Suan shrugged it off, convincing herself that all large Tibetan Mastiffs must have large teeth. Then Suan started to see certain facial features, like his snout, becoming more pronounced. Suan was in denial and was shrugging off some of the signs that she knew deep down pointed to trouble. While Suan was unsettled by her ever-growing dog, her children were loving all of the attention that came with having the biggest pet in the area. People in the neighborhood started to hear all about the peculiar adopted puppy. Taking the dog for walks became a spectacle, as Little Black kept getting larger and larger. As he continued to grow, there was barely any room for Little Black in their home. Soon enough, Suan and her family started to keep him in a makeshift doghouse outside of it. But it wasn't like putting the pet in the backyard meant that any of the underlying problems went away. Besides Little Black's teeth and overall oversized being, there was another thing that was growing a little larger: his temper. Little Black was beginning to lash out at Suan and her family, and while luckily no one got hurt, they did get a little spooked. That was when Suan realized that over the last 2 years of having Little Black in the family, she'd never heard him bark. That's not to say that he didn't make noise. Little Black would often growl, but not in the way that a dog usually would. No, it sounded more like a roar. Suan was increasingly getting more scared of the adopted animal she'd brought home. At just a little over age 2, Suan was officially scared of her own dog. After some research into different behaviors and characteristics that Suan had witnessed, like Little Black's teeth, propensity to standing on his hind legs and his size, Suan was taken aback. It turned out that what she thought was the pet Tibetan Mastiff she'd been caring for was something else entirely. Suan's pet dog was in fact actually a huge black bear. She could barely believe what she was reading, but every single indicator she read confirmed her fears. Suan kept collecting information. Little Black was not just a normal black bear, he was an Asiatic black bear, also known as a Tibetan bear or a Himalayan bear. This specific type of black bear is known to be medium-sized, but even still they can reach 440 pounds and stand over 6 feet tall. While Asiatic bears like Little Black are usually herbivorous, they can be aggressive towards humans when aggravated. Suan started to look into what to do and saw that owning a bear in China was a crime punishable by jail. The mother of 2 quickly realized she was in a dire situation. As much as Suan had grown to love Little Black, she knew that he had to be removed from her home. But how does one go about getting their gigantic pet black bear to a safe new home? She had no idea where to start. Suan's first idea was to call the local zoo to see if there was a space for Little Black. The zoo wanted to help, but said that without a birth certificate, they couldn't even consider taking the bear in and giving him a new home. Reluctantly, Suan knew what she had to do, and she knew that it could land her in even more trouble. Suan had no other choice but to call the police and tell them about the strange predicament she'd gotten herself into. Within just a few minutes, the police and wildlife experts at the Forest Public Security Bureau were at the scene. Suan spoke to police and fully cooperated with all of their questions. In an interview, Suan told reporters that the more Little Black grew, the more like a bear he looked. She also told reporters that she was a little scared of bears. No kidding. She explained to police what had happened, but it wasn't until the police went into Suan's backyard that they were truly shocked by what they saw. Police and forestry officials walked into Suan's backyard and immediately saw a startling sight: a gigantic animal sitting in a caged area. Upon first sight, they knew that the animal was definitely not a dog. Once they inspected Little Black, they confirmed what Suan already knew: her pet was most likely a bear. Police began to question Suan about the adoption, raising Little Black, and where exactly her pet came from. Suan filled the police in on the dangerous mix-up and told them all about how she had accidentally adopted a black bear. But would that be enough to keep her from almost inevitable consequences? While the police were gathering information about Little Black, wildlife experts were looking over the pet bear. The officials checked for any signs of injury or malnourishment, and Suan stood nearby, fearful for the consequences of hosting a bear in her backyard. After the preliminary checkup, officials determined that Little Black was well-fed, healthy, and happy. Next, they had to figure out how to get the gigantic bear to the wildlife rescue center nearby. Little Black was tranquilized so that he would have a safe transport and was taken away to the local wildlife center, but the question still lingered about whether Suan would be penalized for housing it. Experts again confirmed Suan's fear as soon as Little Black arrived at the wildlife center. Indeed, Suan had unknowingly kept a potentially dangerous Asiatic black bear in her own backyard. The discovery sparked a ton of media attention, with everyone wondering how Suan could have possibly not realized she had a black bear living in her home. Even National Geographic wrote about the shocking story and caused a viral sensation, but more surprisingly, a handful of people shared stories of their own about adopting pets and later realizing they were a different species entirely. With more media attention, Suan was more fearful that police would choose to press charges. Suan continued to cooperate with the police about the unfortunate mishap, and it seemed to pay off. Despite Asiatic black bears being a protected species in China due to poaching, Suan was able to avoid jail time, and the police had said that any penalty would be reduced due to her cooperation. The entire ordeal was shocking for the entire family, but they don't blame their former pet. There are still many days that Suan and her entire family miss Little Black. There's still some hope for a future reunion one day, as Little Black was put in a nearby reserve. But luckily for everyone, his backyard days are over.